My central section of the new post is now done. This is actually a tapered section, not square. So, but because of the design of this new post, I do need to clad this round to create an inner panel. If I taper all 4 sides of this at once, before I put my timber strips on to create my panel work, it's going to make it a lot more difficult for me to do my paneling because I'm working on a tapered side, which means when I come down to my corners, if I do these square, I'm going to end up with a thinner panel in the middle, which I don't want. This needs to be square and the outer edges of the new post need to be tapered. I also don't want to clad it first, because if I then start to taper it afterwards, the panel thickness of the trims around the outside are going to be narrower or thinner at the top, which isn't going to look right. I still need to keep a uniform thickness, which is, on this case, is 10 millimeters. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to temporarily do the panels on 2 sides, so the top and the bottom. This will allow me then to do the taper on this section. I'll be able to remove these and then taper the other section. That'll allow me to do all 4 tapers whilst keeping all my timbers square. I need to make sure that all my timbers are in line with each other when they meet the base section. I don't want to just eyeball it or try and do it as I did with the base section. So the easiest way that I'm going to do this, I'm going to insert the square section into it, into the actual base itself. That's now going to give me a working point all the way around, which just makes everything a lot more easier to line up. I can just, as long as my timbers are touching my base section, I know I'm square. On the top, I'm going to also overhang these as well to basically replicate what I've done on the base section to create a little bit of a mortise for my top square section. This is essentially the panel I'm going to create. I do need to round a chamfer on these edges just to reduce the thickness of this. So this will just be probably around a 5mm chamfer. So once I've got the top and the bottom on here, these are just going to be temporarily tacked into place with a bit of mitre glue, just so they don't move. I'm going to put these 2 surfaces on the thickness planer and taper these down. I can then remove these and permanently glue them onto the tapered 2 sides. That's then created the taper on this section. It'll then go back on the thickness planer again to taper the top and bottom side. Once that panel's on, I'll be able to fit the top panel on. That'll give me an even taper all around on all 4 sides, whilst maintaining the same thickness inner panel. It's just a lot easier to do it that way rather than trying to taper this section on all 4 sides first and then having to taper each individual strip to match that. I can basically cheat and just cut out a process of tapering this whilst it's on the 2 sides. These are quite easily be removed because I'm only going to put a tack top and bottom, pull them off with a chisel, and then they'll be permanently fixed onto the tapered sides and they'll already be pre-tapered. I can then fit essentially the other straight section on top and then taper them down as well. So around the base of the taper section where it joins onto the actual base of the new post, I need to put a taper section. This is essentially going to be 2 pieces of timbers that are going to be mitered round, and then my actual panel itself is going to fit flush with that. These will be done primarily on the miter saw, but no matter how well your miter saws are set up, there's always some discrepancy what you've got to allow with the blade deflections and so on. So I will be final trimming these with the guillotine. I'm going to use the inner section before I taper this down to take on my measurements for these. So I'm going to leave this in place and cut all the way around to make sure that my plinths are all aligned. And before I glue the inner section in, the panels and the plinth block will be glued to this portion, the middle section of the new post. Then it'll be fully inserted, and that's going to give me my finishing point where it meets up to it. So I don't need to do anything here. That's why it was so important to make sure that when I was gluing the base section up, that this top edge was fully aligned. So I know my guillotine's perfectly set up to 45 degrees, which is why I'm choosing to do the final pass on here. Even though my miter saw is quite well set up and it's a good quality one, there's no deflection in the blade at all on the guillotine. So it makes things a lot more precise when you're doing miters. Now that I've got both inner plinth sections done, I can glue these together. I'm not going to glue them to the center section yet because I still have to taper them down. But I can get them glued up to make sure that they're in line, and it's one less thing to glue up. Gluing it up on the actual center section will ensure that when I come to do the final fitment of everything, my mortise and tenons are still lining up, so I can, because this is going to be fixed, and I don't want any issues with the final glue up, so it's a lot easier. It's already automatically aligned to where it needs to be because the actual center section is holding it in place. So I'm going to put a couple of little clamps on there just to hold everything together on each corner. I don't have to worry about it coming misaligned while it's on the center section because it's fitted around. I'll leave this for about 10 minutes to tack up, then I'll remove this because I want to get the center section tapered up as well. I also want to create another mortise on the top for my top section to fit into, which is easily done with the sections here that I'm gluing on afterwards. That's going to give me not going to be as deep as the original one on the bottom where it goes onto the base rail. This can now be removed. So can those two plinth sections. Tapering this down is going to be quite simple and easy to do. I'm going to do it on the thickness planer. There's no set angle for this that I'm going to be working from. I'm going to take off 9mm at the top. The easiest way to do that is to put it on a temporary sled. All I'm going to do is put a base, which is an 18mm MDF. To create my 9mm, I'm just going to insert a piece of 9mm timber under one end. That's going to allow me to chamfer one side off. Once I rotate it over, I can't just put it back on the same one because that's essentially going to give me a level plane again. So I then need to insert another piece of 9mm, which then will create the same matching chamfer. I'll repeat that for all four sides. Now tapered down on two sides. I'm going to pull these to one side. They're now already tapered down. I've essentially got the same as what I've got here, which are going to be fitted on here. I'm going to repeat the process again, which will then taper these down. That way I'm going to get all my trims all tapered down at the same time, and then I'll permanently glue these back on, and that'll be the central section now finished, and it'll just be the top section, which is just a straight piece and a top cap.